You know what it is? I love it.
Here's the way I want to start. I think there are people that have always been in our ministry who are tempted by two different ideas, and they're both a little bit of temptations. And some of us have been tempted by both of these ideas at different times. And one idea is, why don't we just stop doing ministry with half the people we deal with? Because it's just looks so unproductive or so far gone, right? And the other idea is, how could we ever stop ministering to anyone ever? Like the reverse idea. Because that'd be like writing off a soul, and that's like so tragic, So we kind of have these opposite little temptations that float around. I think some of us are tempted by each, if not both. And now let's approach this question of like the hopeless, there's a repeated phrase in the lives of the saints that is, the poorest of the poor. So-and-so went to serve the poorest of the poor. St. Alphonsus, one of our patrons, his goal was to evangelize the poorest of the poor, right? And that doesn't mean, and at Simple House, we've always set out to work with the poorest of the poor, and that does not mean that anyone we work with is the poorest of the poor. If someone, doesn't mean that everyone we work with is the poorest of the poor, but what it does mean is, if there is a door in DC or in Kansas City where we know someone poorer than anyone we deal with lives, we need to get our butts down there, that we're not going to ignore any of these people, and we're going to search them out, and we're going to turn over rocks and find them. We're not like dodging hard cases, right? But who is more poor than the hopeless, right? And these hopeless people even have their own patron saint, St. Jude. It's kind of odd, right? And first off, let's clarify, and I think this is what Victoria was saying a moment ago. Is anyone really hopeless? How can we say anyone's hopeless? No one's really hopeless. Like, does God really desert anyone in this life? Well, no. So, in that sense, no one ever is hopeless, so that's kind of a weird way to use the term. But the way St. Jude is patron of hopeless causes and things, we have to think that there are people who there's just no obvious worldly help. There's people who are really down and out, who you have some insight that's maybe just a blessing from God that's just like, this person can really turn around, or this person has so much potential and God's letting me see it. And there's other people who you look at who you don't see that. You don't see any of that potential. You can't figure it out. You could, come up with the sociological explanation, the psychological, the religious, and you're just not seeing it, happen, And this is someone I define as hopeless. You don't even have a strategy that you're like, this is what will work, And you may even come to this decision after working with the person for years, So these people are who I'm kind of talking about as the hopeless. So this is the big problem, and I think this is what Laura just brought up, is that do we pour our resources, our time, our energy, our love into the poorest of the poor and the hopeless, or the high potential and the worthy? Which I might call the innocent and the downtrodden. And I think what we should consider is that at some level, any worldly progress that happens because of our ministry, even any religious knowledge and all of these things that happen, are going to pass away. We have this quote from Paul in Corinthians where it's like, all knowledge and all these things will pass away. The only thing that is going to endure is love. And if you consider how Mary and Jesus did ministry for all the hidden years, it's like, it wasn't like tons of converts and saved people were rolling out of Nazareth that we have any record of. And even after Jesus started to do ministry, this idea that was kicked out about, Jesus didn't have a good entrepreneurial business plan. He just didn't have like a plan of attack that like made a lot of sense with high productivity. But what he did have was faith, hope, and love, and that's why we look at his whole life and ministry as successful. And I think it's in that perspective that we have to see whether or not our work is successful. Not just by the religious knowledge gained by people or by worldly progress that people achieve. And in that same quote by Paul, he says, "Love never fails." So if we do this with great love on a hopeless cause, love never fails. And it is eternal in and of itself. So we've kind of done the eternal act even there. I do think, so now let's backtrack a little bit. I do think it's advisable to often prioritize people who are downtrodden, innocent, and have high potential. If we've got 3 people we're going to go see and, $1,000 is going to send a kid to college, let's spend that $1,000, let's get that kid to college, or let's help this person who's getting ready to enter the church, or let's do some prioritization like that, right? But at the same time, we cannot neglect or forget these people who we do not see hope for. And I think in this way, we model God, like if we're called to be Christ-like or God-like, God is not loving us because of our worthiness or because of the potential or what we're going to bring to the table once he works with us a little bit. God is loving us regardless. So I think that sometimes if we only love the success cases in our ministry, we can never be sure if our love is pure. Because in a sense, these are the people who give the most back to us too. We truly know we're following the new commandment, which is to love others as God loves us, when we're loving people who we see no return from.